I've always said space is the final frontier, not because it's vast and unexplored, but because it's indifferent. It doesn't care if you're a hero, a coward, or a legend in your own mind. Out here, you're just another speck in an ocean of black. That thought used to comfort me, until the day it didn't. The nebulous Grace, my home for the past 6 years, had always been reliable. She wasn't pretty, but she got the job done, hauling cargo and hope between colonies scattered across the Perseus Arm. My crew and I had faced plenty of dangers before: rogue pirates, hull breaches, a star going nova uncomfortably close. But nothing could have prepared us for what we found drifting near the asteroid belt of Zorath 12. It started with a distress signal. Faint, garbled, and haunting. The kind that twists your gut before you even decode it. "Captain!" Darnell, my comms officer, called from the bridge. His voice was steady, but I could hear the edge in it. "You need to hear this." I stepped into the dimly lit bridge, where holographic displays cast an eerie glow across the crew's tense faces. Darnell played the transmission, and the sound clawed its way into my ears, a mix of static, muffled screams, and a single, chilling word. Help! That's the thing about space. You don't ignore a call for help. It's an unspoken rule among those who sail the stars. And so, against my better judgment, I gave the order. "Bring us closer to the source." The derelict vessel came into view like a ghost in the void. Its hull was battered, scorched in places, and its lights flickered weakly like a dying heartbeat. The name Eclipse Horizon was barely legible on its side. "It's a colonial transport," said Dr. Vega, our medic. "Manifest shows a crew of 25 and 100 passengers." "Life signs?" I asked, my voice heavy with suspicion. "Faint. Scattered." I should have turned us around right then. But curiosity and duty are dangerous bedfellows, and I was never good at saying no to either. "Suit up," I ordered. "We're going in." We docked with the Eclipse Horizon and entered through the airlock, the hiss of decompression the only sound breaking the silence. The ship's interior was a mausoleum of chaos, scorch marks on the walls, claw-like gouges on the metal floors, and an acrid smell that made my stomach churn. Then we found the first body. At least, I thought it was a body. Its features were twisted beyond recognition, flesh pallid and veined with sickly green. Its mouth hung open in a silent scream, and its eyes, if you could call them that, were nothing more than black, hollow pits. "Captain," whispered Jenkins, our engineer, his voice trembling. "What the hell is this?" I didn't have an answer, but deep down I knew. This wasn't just a ship in distress. This was a trap. The hiss of the airlock behind us echoed in my ears as we stumbled back into the safety of the nebulous Grace. The silence of our ship felt oppressive now, a stark contrast to the chaos we just escaped. Jenkins collapsed against a bulkhead, clutching at the tear in his suit. "Get him to medbay," I ordered Vega, my voice sharper than I intended. "Now!" She nodded, already pulling out her portable scanner to assess the damage. "Captain, if that thing scratched him—" "I know," I interrupted, not wanting to entertain the implications yet. "Just do what you can." Jenkins groaned as Vega helped him to his feet, the two of them disappearing down the corridor. I turned to Darnell, who was still gripping his motion detector like it was a lifeline. His hands were trembling. "You okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He gave a tight nod, but his eyes told a different story. "Captain, what the hell were those things?" "I don't know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "But I intend to find out." I stepped onto the bridge, where the familiar hum of the ship's systems did little to calm my nerves. The viewport showed the Eclipse Horizon, now eerily still, with a faint green glow from its hull pulsing like a warning beacon. I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped, only delayed whatever horror had claimed that ship. "Computer," I said, addressing the ship's AI. Begin a full sensor sweep of the eclipse horizon. Focus on biosignatures and any anomalous energy readings. Confirm, the AI responded in its monotone voice. Scan in progress. Results expected in 5 minutes. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. As I waited, my mind wandered back to the moment we'd first received the distress signal. I'd heard hundreds of such calls in my time as a captain, but something about this one had felt different. The static had been too deliberate, the garbled words too precise. Play back the signal, I ordered. The bridge filled with a haunting sound again, static interspersed with faint screams and that single, chilling word. Help! Can you isolate the background noise? I asked. Processing, the AI replied. After a moment, the static faded, leaving only the faint screams. But beneath them, I could hear something else. A low, rhythmic clicking, like the sound of claws tapping against metal. What is that? Darnell asked, stepping onto the bridge. Something we shouldn't have ignored, I said grimly. By the time the scan results came in, Vega was back on the bridge, her face pale. How's Jenkins? I asked. Stable for now, she said. But Captain, there's something in his bloodstream. It's like the green substance we saw on the bodies. I'm running tests, but if it spreads, we're not letting it spread, I said firmly. Keep him isolated. Her expression told me she wasn't convinced we could contain it. The AI interrupted with its report. Sensor sweep complete. Biosignatures detected, 87. Anomalous energy readings consistent with... Wait, I cut in. 87? The manifest said there were 125 people on board. Correct, the AI confirmed. Biosignatures do not match standard human patterns. Significant mutation detected. Mutations, Vega muttered. Captain, whatever infected that ship, it's rewriting them at the cellular level. That explains the things we saw, Darnell said. But what about the energy readings? Could that be the source of this infection? The AI displayed a schematic of the eclipse horizon, highlighting its engineering deck. Anomalous energy is emanating from the reactor core. Source unknown. Against my better judgment, I made the call to go back. We couldn't just leave the eclipse horizon adrift, not when there was a chance this infection could spread to other ships. I'm coming with you, Vega insisted, her jaw set. Absolutely not, I said. I need you here, monitoring Jenkins and running more tests. Captain, I'm the only one qualified to analyze whatever we find in that reactor, she argued. She had a point, but I still didn't like it. After a moment's hesitation, I relented. Fine, but you follow my lead, understood? Darnell volunteered to join as well, though his hands were still shaking. I gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Stay close and keep that motion detector on. We suited up again, the weight of the situation pressing down on us like the vacuum of space. The engineering deck was even worse than the rest of the ship. The green veins were thicker here, pulsing with a sickly light that cast unsettling shadows on the walls. The air was heavy, filled with a faint buzzing sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We reached the reactor core, and Vega immediately began scanning the area. Captain, she said after a moment, her voice tinged with awe and fear. This isn't just an infection. It's alive. What do you mean? The reactor isn't generating energy anymore, she said, pointing to her scanner. These veins, they're feeding off it, converting it into something else. Before I could respond, Darnell's motion detector went wild again. They're here, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The creatures emerged from the shadows, their black eyes glinting in the green light. But these were different, larger, faster, and more grotesque than the ones we'd faced before. Fall back, I shouted, firing as one of them lunged toward us. We retreated, but they were relentless, their screeches echoing through the corridors. Back on the nebulous Grace, I made a difficult call. "We have to destroy the eclipse horizon," I said. "But Captain," Vega protested, "there could still be survivors. If we don't, this thing could spread to the colonies," I said. "Do you want to be responsible for that?" She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes told me she understood. "Set the charges," I ordered. As we prepared to detonate the derelict ship, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. It had been a day since we left the eclipse horizon, but the specter of that cursed ship lingered aboard the nebulous Grace. The crew, usually talkative and resilient, moved about the ship in tense silence. Even the hum of the engines, a comforting constant in our lives, now seemed ominous. The derelict vessel was gone, obliterated by a controlled detonation of its reactor core. Yet, deep in my gut, I knew the problem wasn't over. As I stared at the glowing embers of my cigar in the darkness of my quarters, the truth gnawed at me like a parasite. Whatever infected the eclipse horizon had likely found its way aboard my ship. A sharp knock broke my thoughts. "Enter," I called, exhaling a cloud of smoke. It was Vega. She looked exhausted, her usual composure frayed. "We have a problem, Captain," she said without preamble. "Go on." She hesitated, then handed me a datapad. "It's Jenkins. His condition's worsening, fast." I read through the data. Elevated heart rate, erratic neural activity, and a spreading greenish discoloration along his veins. "What's causing this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. She shook her head. "I've analyzed his blood, his cells, whatever this is, it's rewriting his DNA. It's like his body's not his anymore. It's fighting itself. And the others? For now, no symptoms. But if he's infected, there's a chance others might be too." I felt the weight of her words, like a lead anchor in my chest. "Keep monitoring the crew." "And Vega." "Yes, Captain? If Jenkins turns, you know what to do." Her face hardened. She nodded once, then left without another word. It happened during the next shift. Darnell was on the bridge with me, running diagnostics on our life support systems. Vega was in the medbay, tending to Jenkins, while the rest of the crew busied themselves with maintenance. "Captain," Darnell said suddenly, his voice edged with panic. "We've got a power fluctuation in Sector 3B. I'm reading movement near the junction box." "Movement?" I asked, already on my feet. "Yeah, but it's weird. The thermal signature isn't normal." I grabbed my sidearm. "Let's check it out." We made our way to the junction box, the corridors eerily quiet. The lights flickered sporadically, casting long, shifting shadows that played tricks on the eyes. "Over there," Darnell whispered, pointing to a maintenance hatch. The panel was ajar, faint green tendrils creeping out from its edges. "Damn it," I muttered, motioning for Darnell to cover me. I yanked the panel open, revealing a writhing mass of green-veined organic matter fused with the wiring. It pulsed like a living heart, and the faint buzzing sound I'd heard on the eclipse horizon filled the air. "Captain, what is that?" Darnell asked, his voice trembling. "Trouble," I said grimly. Before I could say more, the mass convulsed violently, and a creature burst forth. It was smaller than the ones we'd seen on the eclipse horizon, but just as fast and vicious. It lunged at Darnell, knocking him to the ground. I fired instinctively, the plasma bolt tearing through the creature's head. It screeched, its body spasming before collapsing into a twitching heap. "You okay?" I asked, helping Darnell to his feet. "Yeah," he panted, his eyes wide. "But what the hell was that?" "I think we just found our first stowaway," I said. The encounter in the maintenance hatch was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, More incidents were reported, strange noises in the cargo bay, systems going offline without explanation, and faint green glows in areas that should have been pitch dark. In the med bay, Jenkins' condition deteriorated rapidly. His veins now glowed faintly, and his eyes had taken on the same hollow, black appearance as the creatures we'd faced. He was no longer conscious, but his body twitched sporadically, as though something inside him was trying to break free. "Captain," Vega said, her voice low, "we need to quarantine the entire med bay. If this spreads..." "Do it," I said, "and keep an eye on anyone who's been in close contact with him." I gathered the crew in the mess hall, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. "Listen up," I began, keeping my voice steady. "We're dealing with a contamination. It started with the eclipse horizon, but it's here now. We've already seen signs of it spreading, and we need to act fast to contain it." "What kind of contamination?" asked Rhea, our chief mechanic. "The kind that turns people into monsters," I said bluntly. The room fell silent. "What's the plan?" Darnell asked. "For now, we focus on isolating the infected areas and anyone showing symptoms. Vega's running tests to figure out how it spreads, but until then, I want everyone armed and on high alert. No one goes anywhere alone." "And Jenkins?" Rhea asked hesitantly. I hesitated. "We'll do what we can for him. But if he turns, we'll deal with it." The strain began to take its toll on the crew. Fear bred paranoia, and paranoia bred conflict. Arguments broke out over who might be infected, and some began refusing to follow orders. "You're putting us all at risk," shouted Alvarez, one of the cargo handlers. "We should have left Jenkins to die on that damned ship." "Enough," I barked, slamming my fist on the table. "We're a crew. We face this together, or we don't face it at all." My words seemed to settle them for the moment, but I could see the doubt lingering in their eyes. Vega finally called me back to the med bay. She looked worse than before, her hands shaking slightly as she handed me her report. "The infection isn't airborne," she said. "It spreads through contact with the green substance. Once it enters the bloodstream, it hijacks the body, converting it into one of those creatures." "How long does it take?" "Depends on the individual. Jenkins lasted about 48 hours. But based on what I've seen, the process accelerates if the host is injured or under stress." As if on cue, an alarm blared through the ship. "Captain," the eye said, "biosignatures detected in the cargo bay. Multiple entities. Movement erratic." We rushed to the cargo bay, weapons drawn. The doors hissed open, revealing chaos. Crates overturned, green tendrils snaking across the walls, and at least 5 of the creatures skulking in the shadows. "Open fire!" I shouted. The battle was brutal. The creatures were faster and smarter than before, using the maze of crates to their advantage. We managed to take them down, but not without cost. Alvarez was bitten during the fight, and though he insisted he was fine, I could see the green discoloration spreading from the wound. "Get him to med bay," I ordered. "But Captain..." "Now!" Back on the bridge, I stared at the holographic display of the nebulous Grace, now dotted with red alerts indicating contaminated zones. Vega joined me, her face pale. "Captain," she said, "we can't contain this. If we don't find a way to stop it, the ship will be overrun." She was right, but deep down, I knew there was no easy solution. We were running out of time. The nebulous Grace was no longer just a ship. It had become a battlefield. The infection was spreading faster than Vega's tests could keep up with. Alvarez turned less than 3 hours after the fight in the cargo bay. When Vega tried to sedate him, he snapped the restraints on his gurney and attacked her. We managed to subdue him, if you can call reducing a man-turned monster to ashes with a plasma rifle subduing. But Vega wasn't the same after that. None of us were. The green tendrils continued to grow, spreading through the corridors like a living cancer. The AI began reporting system failures, life support, navigation, even weapons control. The infection wasn't just taking over the crew, it was taking over the ship itself. I gathered the remaining crew, what was left of them, in the mess hall. There were only 4 of us now: Vega, Darnell, Rhea, and me. "We're out of options," I said, my voice heavy. "We have to abandon ship." "Abandon ship?" Rhea repeated, her tone incredulous. "And go where? We're in the middle of nowhere. There's a colony 3 days out," I said. "If we can reach the escape pods, we can." "Captain," Vega interrupted, "you're assuming the infection hasn't reached the pods yet. And even if it hasn't, what if one of us is carrying it?" Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. She was right. If even one of us was infected, we could doom the entire colony. "There's another option," Darnell said hesitantly. I turned to him. "I'm listening." "We scuttle the ship," he said. "Blow the reactor, take the infection with it." "That'll kill us too," Rhea pointed out. "Not if one of us stays behind to manually detonate it," Darnell said. The room fell silent. We debated for hours, but deep down, I knew there was no other way. The infection was spreading too fast. If it reached the colony, billions of lives would be at risk. "I'll do it," I said finally. "No," Vega said, standing abruptly. "Captain, you can't." "This is my ship," I interrupted. "My crew. My responsibility." "Then let me stay," she said. "I've already been exposed more than anyone else. For all we know, I'm already infected." I looked into her eyes and saw the resolve there. She was right. And as much as I hated to admit it, her staying behind made more sense. "Fine," I said reluctantly. "But we do this by the book. We seal off the bridge, lock down the escape pods, and make sure the infection doesn't get off this ship. Understood?" She nodded. The next few hours were a blur. We sealed the infected sections of the ship, rerouted power to the escape pods, and prepped the reactor for overload. All the while, the green tendrils crept closer, as if the infection knew what we were planning. When the time came to say goodbye, it was harder than I'd expected. Vega stood at the reactor console, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. "Captain," she said, her voice calm, "take care of them. And make sure this doesn't happen again." "I will," I said, my throat tight. She gave me a faint smile, then turned back to the console. The escape pod ejected with a jolt, and the nebulous gray shrank into the distance. I watched from the viewport as the ship's lights flickered and died, the green glow of the infection consuming it from within. Then, a blinding flash. The reactor went critical, and the ship was engulfed in a fiery explosion. For a moment, I felt nothing but silence. No hum of the engines, no chatter of the crew, just the hollow void of space. We drifted for days, the pod's limited supplies barely keeping us alive. Eventually, a passing freighter picked up our distress signal. The crew didn't ask questions. They could see the exhaustion in our eyes, the scars on our souls. As we docked at the colony, I couldn't help but wonder if we truly escaped the infection, or if it had followed us, hidden in the blood of the survivors. I sat in the pod's cramped quarters, staring at the recorder in my hand. Finally, I pressed the button. "This is Captain John Rogers of the Nebulous Grace. Final log entry. We faced something out there, something we weren't ready for. An infection that consumes everything it touches, turning it into something alien. We lost good people. Vega, she gave her life to stop it. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. That it's out there, waiting for the next ship, the next crew. To anyone who finds this, stay vigilant. Stay curious. And if you hear a distress signal, think twice before you answer. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking up. I set the recorder down, my hand trembling. Whatever was waiting out there, I'd be ready for it.